How is it going, Panther Nation? Welcome to episode 5 of the Paws Up Podcast. First thing, have a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone who's watching, whether it's FIU faithful or someone just joining in on our Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube channels. Welcome to episode 5. We got Eric Henry in the house. The man, the myth, the Underdog Dynasty legend is joining us to talk a bit of FIU football. How you doing, Eric?
First off, Jake, both you guys, Jake and Kevin, happy holidays. Appreciate you guys having me on. I don't know that I'm worthy of that introduction, but I will take it. The check is in the mail. Really honored to be on the podcast and the show. And I know that may sound sarcastic, but anyone who, I've talked to both you guys at games. A big thing for me is I really like to see FIU grads really involved in FIU sports. As someone who was a non-FIU grad, I obviously can take it from a certain perspective, but I don't have the same perspective as Jake, you an FIU grad, and Kevin, you soon to be FIU student. So really a fan of what you guys are doing. Need more of it. This is like the future of the FIU fan base. I'm sure I'm reciting Scott Carr's talking points, but there you go.
Oh, absolutely. That's what we're here for, just to talk all things FIU, no matter what time of the year it is, especially right now. Quite a bit of time after the football season has ended. Here we are with some brand new stuff to talk about, and who better to bring it on than Mr. Henry? So correct me if I missed something, Eric Henry, but you're both an editor and a podcast host for Underdog Dynasty, covering both FIU as well as Conference USA.
That is correct. Yeah. So my official title is the managing editor of Underdog Dynasty. So all of the things that the public doesn't see, myself and my other fellow managing editor, Joe Lonergan, take care of. So we, run the day-to-day operations of the site, the moderation of the comments, which is a huge part of any online entity nowadays. We take care of that. Of course, editing stories that comes in. Love our team. Great job. Our guy. Shout out to Steve Helwig, who's on site right now. If you're watching a bowl game on ESPN, the Armed Forces Bowl, Steve Helwig is on site for us right now. So shout out to him. But yeah, do that. And in addition to that, of course, host the Conference USA podcast and manage to provide what I hope is sufficient coverage of the FIU football program.
Oh, yeah. Any coverage this FIU football program gets, I know Mike McIntyre and Scott Carr just licking their chops, being, all right, this is what we sign up for. The more the merrier, and that's what we're going to be talking about quite a bit today. So before we get to the signing class that Mike McIntyre recently held a press conference about, before we get to that, I just want to hear your thoughts, your overall season analysis on FIU football. Just from what we saw this year, there were some good moments, and there were also plenty of bad. So just what would be your overall assessment of the team after this season put into a grade form? So from F to A, how would you grade FIU football?
B.
A B.
And I know that may be high for some people, but let's just call a spade a spade. I can't reiterate this enough, especially during the season after let's chop it up in quarters. So I think the Long Island, sorry, that's 2021. The Bryant victory. I think that I don't want to say it reset the expectations for FIU fans, but I think it kind of level set a little bit for any fans who came in and thought, okay, this is an FCS team, we should go in and roll over them, yada, 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 who weren't familiar. That level set that, hey, this truly is a rebuild. We can talk about the fact that, Jake, as you know, Kevin, I'm sure you probably know as well, this team had 50-something players on the roster at the end of last season and really had to fight to get enough players on the roster to hold a sufficient spring practice. I mean, that was the start. Of course, following that, they had to, add players to the roster and try to figure out who the quarterback was going to be, who some of the standout, players as far as the offensive line were going to be, an entire new defense. So you carry that into Bryant, that was a level set. I think the shock was Texas State and Western Kentucky, right? Yeah. That was the shock and awe of, oh my gosh, are we this bad? This is the worst it's ever been, so on and so forth. Like I can't attest to before my 5 years covering FIU, but I think that was kind of the shock and awe. Then you come back and you get the wins over New Mexico State and Charlotte. And I think at that point in time, FIU fans kind of had somewhat of a realistic idea of what this team may be. But with that being said, 4-8 is what I predicted. I got the Bryant, I got Bryant, New Mexico State, and I think those are the only two wins that I called before the year that I actually got right. I did not have them winning Charlotte. I actually had them beating Middle Tennessee State. That obviously didn't happen.
Mhm.
But you take a look at what's been identified, guys. For me, a big thing was quarterback.
Yeah.
You had a 3-star recruit in Grayson James. You had a 3-star recruit in Hayden Carlson. Grayson now was in his second year. He doesn't win the job out of camp. So then you're now wondering, okay, is he truly as good as his, perspective was coming into FIU? You have Hayden Carlson, who, Jake, as you know, former head coach Butch Davis said, kind of reminded me of that kid from Kansas City talking about Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes kind of got everyone's hopes up a little bit. Like, all right, we need to see that. He doesn't win the job. He's the third-string quarterback. At least now, Grayson has 10 starts under his belt. You've seen some flashes. You saw Hayden against FBS competition. Certainly wasn't the greatest game with the 4 picks, but he showed plenty of potential of pushing the ball downfield in the 4 touchdowns and the elusiveness that Butch Davis talked about. So that's one. Number 2, that offensive line did get experience. Out of the entire offensive line for the most part, outside of Lindell Hudson, we're going to be first-time starters at the FBS level. You lose Ray Burnett midway through the year. You lose some guys who choose to depart the program. You've at least now identified John Bach, seems to be a promising player. Jacob Peace, a big boy there at guard, seems to be a promising player. And then Shamar Habdi Lee is another player at left tackle. At least identified some pieces that you think should be better. You go to the defensive side of the ball. Donovan Manuel, he comes up from the FCS level. He's identified as a stud. Demetrius Hill looks to be the second coming potentially of Jonathan Cyprian. You've identified some guys now that you say, okay, we had just this lump of clay that we didn't really know what we were molding into. Now, despite the fact that you lose Rivaldo Fairweather, Andrew Volmar, Gathan Bernadelle, you still look at the roster and say, okay, we've had young guys that were part of the past 2 or 3 recruiting classes who are stepping in and playing football, playing valuable minutes. I mean, he's a guy like Keegan Davis as an example. When Keegan came on the scene, he was a hybrid DN tight end. All of a sudden, you see him this time, before the season starts, and he's bulked up to 265, 270. You say, okay, like, did he have the most flashy or standout plays this year? No, but the starting experience, it's learning on the job. It's on the job training. So in my mind, you take what you have from last year, and I know we'll talk about the recruiting class a bit. You bring in that recruiting class, and then you say, okay, 2023, let's go play ball.
Yeah. And it doesn't look that bad. And that's something that Jake and I were talking about, that, yes, you lost these guys that you mentioned, Eric, and those were some pretty big names, from what we saw, what they did in 2022, Chambers, Bernadelle, Rivaldo, especially in that game against Middle Tennessee. We saw the LA Tech game as well. But it doesn't look that bad. And some of these guys in the recruiting class definitely are going to be huge in terms of what they'll do in 2023. And then I'll just let Jake with the next question.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Mike McIntyre. Eric, You've had the pleasure of speaking with Mike more than pretty much any other person I've ever seen, with all the amount of questions you give him post game in the press conference. You had also mentioned Butch Davis and sort of his football philosophy during his time at FIU. How would you say Mike differs from what you saw with Butch in both a positive and a negative way?
If I were to say one positive thing, this might not be the answer that people are thinking. Of course, Mike McIntyre is an incredibly positive guy.
Yeah.
Butch Davis, not to say that Butch wasn't positive, but I think the frustration was very palpable towards the end of his tenure, in which there wasn't much to really be positive about. And you saw the way that Mike McIntyre handled, especially, like, guys, I'll give you an example, the 73-0 loss. I'm expecting, maybe I just was, scoured by my tenure covering Butch Davis. I was expecting a coach who's going to be, ticked off and not want to talk. Mike McIntyre walks out, makes eye contact with me, gives a little wink and says, hey, I'll be there in a minute. That in itself, the way he handled that, this is positive demeanor. But what I was going to say in terms of a positive is his approach to the transfer portal, his approach to the new age, the new things of college football. That's a positive. If there's one critique, and this might not earn me any brownie points with FIU fans, for all of the FIU fans who thought that Butch Davis the game had passed him by and he forgot how to coach, and I don't believe any of that. And to be transparent, I've had conversations. Butch and I keep casual relationship. A text here or there. We've had a couple conversations. The game, in terms of his knowledge and coaching ability, didn't pass him by. But I would say this to Coach Davis. I would say this to anyone from that staff. the biggest critique I would level of Butch Davis is not adapting with some of the changing factors of college football, like the transfer portal, understanding that players are going to get recruited from your roster that we saw in 2020 and 2021 and go on to different programs. That's just something you have to face. Understanding that NIL is a factor. We just saw UTSA head coach Jeff Traylor just talk about it this year, especially as a group of 5 coach. You have to have a philosophy. And what I mean by that, I'll try to get to the negative. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but Mike McIntyre said, hey, we got to anticipate we're going to lose X amount of guys at X position each year, whether that's graduation, transfer, whatever. And he's recruiting in a way that's like, okay, we have these guys from year to year. We're anticipating this roster management and viewing it in the NFL type of manner, which is you got to reshape your roster every year. Butch Davis was slow to adapt on that. And that may be a byproduct of someone who had his first head coaching tenure in college in 1994. The negative, I would say, of Mike McIntyre, that's tough. I would say this, if from this year, the one negative that I think I would hone on, believe it or not, the decision to start Gunnar Holmberg and maybe the decision to play some of the guys who he brought in. I'll use Dorian Hall as an example, right? Because Gunnar only really got the half, a little bit into the third quarter before he got knocked out.
Yeah.
Dorian Hall was someone who, yes, he was coming off of epilepsy, and we all know Dorian's story. It was him battling epilepsy and, having to miss all of spring, and then he was back for fall. But we saw that Dorian Hall could be a playmaker when he was out there. And we saw Dorian Hall was a playmaker for the better part of 2018 and 2019 when he was rated as one of the top defensive backs in all of Conference USA. I found it curious that he did not earn a starting job out of camp. And I'm not necessarily pinning that all on Mike McIntyre. Again, the circumstances that I said could have played a factor. But once Dorian got his playing time and got his legs, he seemed to be the same old Dorian who we got to know and love. So maybe in that sense, we could look at, okay, I'll give you another one. Maybe one that's more pertinent to FIU fans. And maybe I should use this one as opposed to Dorian. I think it's a fair critique the way Rivaldo Fairweather was used this year, or maybe not used.
Yeah.
I don't have Rivaldo's numbers off the top of me. I'm sure you guys can look that up. But I would venture to say, if you go to Sports Reference, Cultural Reference, and look at the game logs, 75% of Rivaldo's catches came in 2 games. Now, last time I checked, they played 12 games in FBS football in a season. And it had to be at least 75% of his receptions came at the Middle Tennessee State game. He got it from the jump. And then, of course, the Louisiana Tech game, not even until the 4th quarter. It was that one series at the end. And then, of course, into overtime that he produced. And if you look at David Yost's offense, it's an 11 personnel offense. It's one tight end, one running back, right? That's the one back. That's the nature of the offense. You saw the last game against Middle Tennessee, and I'll wrap up the answer on this to give you guys some room to opine here. When Nate Jefferson appeared to leave the program, which of course, Nate, it could go on to better things, go on to different things and just want to pursue an academic career. That's fine. Tyrese Chambers chose to leave the program or to miss that last game. Mike McIntyre said injury.
Yeah.
I didn't see the injury, just to be transparent.
Yeah.
You saw they had to go more 2 tight ends, right? That's what happened. They had to rely more on Rivaldo Fairweather and Josiah Miamin.
Mm-hmm.
From what you know of coaching in a college offense, you don't just install 2 tight end personnel in a week and say, hey, we're going to run it. You have to assume that they have been running some of this 2 tight end personnel and just were kind of forced out of necessity to utilize that a little bit more in the Middle Tennessee State game. I would have liked to have seen Rivaldo be utilized more, as we saw specifically in that game, out in the slot as a tight end. I think that could have benefited, especially as a big body in those red zone situations, which FIU struggled a lot this year. I think that could have been utilized. So I was a little bit long-winded there, but I think that would focus on that as far as the criticism.
Yeah, to add on to what you said about Rivaldo Feather, because I agree, he's one of the most mysterious aspects of what went wrong with this FIU offense. His stats for this season, 28 catches, 426 yards, and only 3 touchdowns. All of those touchdowns, by the way, came exclusively against Middle Tennessee in that 33-28 loss. And now, Rivaldo has found himself what he assumes to be a better home with, I believe, Auburn. And it's crazy. A football team based in Miami is underutilizing their tight end. It sounds a little familiar. I don't know. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it definitely interesting. And I agree. I love the positivity that I got to see from Mike. I couldn't imagine putting myself in his shoes, being a head coach, having 73 points dropped on your team, and having a smile through it all. I couldn't imagine doing that. But Mike found a way, and I'm not in the locker rooms, of course, but I can guarantee that goes a long way with the players. That even through the lowest points of this season, there were quite a few lows. That he was motivated to win. And they won 4 games, which is way more than what a lot of people would have thought this team would do this season.
Basically everyone, right?
I'll just add on to this really quickly, Jake, to your point about the positivity. I know Mac got a little bit of crap at the midseason, specifically after the UTSA game when, quite frankly, I tweeted something out talking about, a lighthearted moment. And Kevin, I think you were part of that presser when Mike McIntyre made the joke about, Walter V and myself not dressing up as the Miami Vice characters. And my point was, what are you expecting to do after a loss? Come in here to start throwing chairs and cry? Because if that's the expectation of your coach, 5-6 games into a rebuild, that was just a little bit surprising. I just want to add on to your point. It's that positive nature. And it's not that he's not willing to get into his guys. We saw that in fall when the second fall practice, he stopped it midway through and said, hey, if you guys want to be 1-11 again, we can practice like this or else pick it up. But expecting, coaches come out there and just be ranting and raving, I thought was unfair. So I'll just add that to the point. Sorry to cut you off, Kevin.
No, and I do believe that was my first game covering FIU football. And I want to mention very quickly, because this we'll go into the next question, a little bit about Grayson James. You mentioned that he came in kind of midway through the season. He was never really named the starter, I guess, until maybe before the FAU game or around that time. I believe it was, Eric. You were there when Mike McIntyre. You knew who I was about to say there. Mike McIntyre named Grayson the starter, but he was all right. I mean, he was pretty good. He kept the team in games at times. Just really never got it going in some games. We could look at the UNT game. Really never got it going there.
Yeah.
Middle Tennessee, he was out. We saw that. So, but he almost passed for 2,000 yards, had 11 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 31.1 QBR. Would you say that Grayson James has done enough to earn himself a starting job in 2023 for the FIU Panthers? And looking now, I mean, they just brought in a new quarterback in the signing class, and we'll mention him, Keon Johnson, who was they flipped him from Auburn. So that was probably one of their bigger signings there. You have Hayden Carlson, you have Armani, I want to say Brooks, and then I believe Gunnar Holmberg retired. So, Eric, did Grayson James do enough to maybe have a more of a possibility to be the starter over these other guys in 2023?
Two-part answer. Did he do enough? Yes. Will he be anointed the starter entering the year? No. That's just, if you look at the way that Mike McIntyre is choosing to do things, I do truly believe, I do truly believe that there are going to be a lot of open competitions. And I think quarterback will be one of those. You can put whatever stock you want to into Hayden Carlson's last performance. In my mind, as I said when I opened the show, is it enough to unseat Grayson? No, but it's enough to say, all right, this 3-star kid does look like he can compete on this level. That's more than you knew for the past 3 years of Hayden Carlson's career. You talk about Amari Jones, of course. Amari comes in and he doesn't get any action. That's expected out of a freshman quarterback. We'll see where he fits in the situation going forward. Gunnar Holmberg, as I had a chance to talk with him, I believe Tuesday evening, that he is back in North Carolina, choosing to retire. And of course, Gunnar's had a good career, so wish him the best of wishes going forward. Mm-hmm. Keon Jenkins, as you talked about, right? Lights out. That's what for anyone who saw the FIU signing day presser, we saw the gimmick where Mike back.
Lights out! Lights out!
There you go. Yeah, there you go. Right on cue. I will not.
Oh man!
I will not reveal the presser, the FIU staffer who flipped the lights on and off. But they clearly were excited. they clearly were excited about Keon Jenkins coming in. As a matter of fact, he'll be on 560. So after you listen to this podcast, you can catch him on 560 and 9:30 tonight with Larry Bluestein. He's someone who comes in, brings a clearly a lot of pedigree. I'll come to him in a second. I just want to finish up the answer on Grayson.
Yep.
You can't put the poor performances on Grayson.
Mm-hmm.
Here's why. If you take a look at the games in which Grayson struggled mightily, he didn't get any time to throw, and there wasn't much open, and the offense as a whole didn't do much.
Yeah.
One of the biggest critiques of this offense for me is, and you have to kind of find out where that sweet spot is between the offensive line's growth and the running backs, but how much success can you expect on offense when you're consistently behind the chains? You're not on schedule. You go from 1st and 10 to 2nd and 9, 2nd and 8 to 3rd and 7. It is hard to convert those types of downs. When you talk with David Yost, he says, look, the playbook opens up a lot more when you're in manageable, right? And ideally, you're staying out of 3rd down. You're going from 1st to 2nd, 1st to 2nd, or 1st to 2nd to 1st, right? Instead of 1st, 2nd, 3rd, back to 1st. Because it's hard to convert on 3rd down. So those are all factors as well. So I think Grayson has done enough. You look at all his physical attributes. You guys have been around Grayson James. You've seen him.
Oh, yeah.
Every bit of 6'3", 230. Like, he's a big, strong-arm quarterback from the state of Texas who, quite frankly, if the transfer portal wasn't what it was now, as far as teams choosing to get quarterbacks out of the portal, Grayson probably would have had more Power 5 interest coming out of high school. But I do quickly want to make this point. This isn't to start a controversy. I think it's just real, guys. We got to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
With Kewan Jenkins coming in, you have a hometown hero who won multiple state titles and turned down a P5 offer to come to FIU.
Yeah.
My interest, I won't say fear or concern. My interest is what happens, A, if Kewan does not win the job, but B, that starting quarterback. Is he having to look behind his shoulder? Because I've tried to look this up. I believe the last local quarterback to sign with the Panthers was E.J. Hilliard. I'm forgetting what year that was. I probably was in high school.
The blast from the past. Holy hell.
Yeah, I think I was in high school. E.J. Hilliard signed. And E.J. Hilliard, no disrespect, was not the type of highly touted local legend that Kewan Jenkins is. Even T.Y. Hilton. FIU's never had a homegrown superstar type of high school athlete come to FIU. T.Y. Hilton, out of Miami Springs, was a nice recruit, someone who, obviously did great things in college, but he wasn't someone who was looked at on the levels of the great receivers come out of Miami, right? Who went to P5.
Yeah.
So I'll be definitely curious your guys' thoughts, because you guys have covered FIU games. You know, the majority of that section right behind the FIU bench are parents and family members. What happens if that starter gets off to a slow start? Similar to how Gunnar Holmberg got off to a slow start this year. When do the cheers start? When does Section 112 start chanting for Kewan? That's something I think you have to keep an eye on going forward.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it. This guy has everything to be a starter, and he may as well win it this first season if he outperforms all these other guys in camp. I mean, you could definitely see it. This guy, as you mentioned, Eric, he turned down a offer from Auburn. Auburn is one of the better schools out there when it comes to college football, one of the best out there. So to turn that down, to come over to FIU, who isn't well known in a different conference, USA, up and coming for sure. So for them to do that, you really have to assume maybe this guy's going to have a good shot to get to start, at least in his first season with FIU.
It's an amazing story, because just on paper, to see this, like you said, a local kid from the South Florida area who threw, I want to say in his senior year in high school, it was like 2,200 yards, and let me just make sure 36 touchdowns with Miami Central. For him to say no to, like you said, Kevin, the big bad SEC, to stay local, not only is that going to obviously draw a bunch of interest to FIU's program, because it's a great story, just like even from an outsider looking in, the hometown kid can get a chance to stay in the hometown and be successful. It might even actually bring some fans to the stadium. It'll draw attention where the money is for FIU football. So Scott Carr is looking at that going, this is the greatest thing I could have asked for. This is exactly what we wanted. It's a great story that I hope translates well to on the field success for FIU, because it's a tough question. Who is the greatest quarterback in FIU football history? And when my first two thoughts are James Morgan and Max Bortenschlager, it's not great. It's not great. It's not a great thing to think about. Okay, no disrespect to those guys, but we have never even sniffed a Bryce Young level quarterback at FIU. Could this be the guy? Maybe. He's 3 stars. He's shown he's got talent, but it's going to be an amazing story to follow for the next few years.
I will concede my bias, Jake. First and foremost, as a professional, I will concede my bias. So I went to high school with who people would argue was the second best quarterback in FIU history, in Alex Magoo. So I have that bias. And then I also covered J-Mo. I covered James Morgan for his entire FIU career. I think James Morgan did a lot. James's contributions for the program, and of course, with Butch Davis no longer being there, there's not that attachment. But James did more for the program, I think people will realize, especially in that 2019 year in which they qualified for the Camellia Bowl. James covered up a lot of deficiencies. That's how I'll put it nicely with that 2019 team. There's a reason why he was a 4th-round pick in the NFL draft. Of course, his career, he's kind of been in and out of the league, just got picked up by Arizona. But I would make the argument that J-Mo was a very good quarterback. But to your point, have they had that superstar? No. I mean, obviously the most high-profile superstar in FIU history is T.Y. Hilton. So they have not had that at a quarterback level. That is a fair assessment. But I got to show some love to J-Mo and, of course,
So I wanted to ask you, Eric, just to wrap up kind of the 2022 season analysis here, who were your most surprising players and most disappointing players this season?
Again, I'll concede something here. I try not to do disappointments when it comes to college athletes, just because there's so many variables that come into play with 18 to 22-year-old players. But if I had to answer the question, I don't want to sound like I'm picking on him, and this may seem like low-hanging fruit. I'll be very intrigued. I won't say disappointing, but I'll be very interested to see what happens with the kicking competition next year. Chase Gabriel is someone who I listen. I could not kick a football. What Chase is being asked to do is not easy.
Yeah.
I think you can point to a clear line of demarcation, that being the Central Michigan game of 2021. Jake, I'm sure, remembers that game.
Oh, yes. Oh, no. The memories, they're flooding in. Oh,
when Chase missed the kick wide right is an understatement. You can point to a clear line of demarcation and say, all right, Chase has not been a very accurate kicker since then. He's got the leg. I mean, I think he may have. I think he's tied Jose Borregales' record for longest field goal made in FIU history. But that's something that you want to see some improvement in. So, again, I hate to use the word disappointment, but that's something I'm definitely keeping an eye on, because it's been rough. And you see they are now bringing a kicker this year in Tyler Patterson to probably push Chase a little bit. Yeah. As far as, like on the flip side of that, I'm going to give you a handful of names. Of course, Gaithan Bernadell's no longer here. That's one that I was really impressed by. So I'll just give you Donovan Manuel.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing his transition from FCS to FBS and filling that inside linebacker role was amazing. Demetrius Hill, that's someone who, again, you guys have seen Demetrius, still got the braces, got the baby face. Demetrius is all of 19 years old, 6 foot, 6'2", 185, 190 pounds. When he bulks into his frame, that's going to be a player who we hope FIU can hang on to for 4 years, but the P5 is going to come calling. I mean, he is a very excellent player. Andrew Volmar, no longer here, but he was one who impressed on the offensive side of the ball. Flex Joseph. Flex is when the line gives Flex something to work with, all of 5'6". If Flex were 5'10", he'd be playing at the P5, and he would have been playing at the P5 out of high school. That's a fact. Yeah. And then at the receiver position, let's show Chris Mitchell some love. Chris is a guy who's battled injuries kind of throughout his career. Had like the fluky injury this year in fall camp, where ironically Gaithan Bernadell, I was there that practice. I can't remember if you guys were there or not, Jake, you were there or not, but it's a tipped pass that gets intercepted, and the pass is going, the play's going the other way, of course, in practice, and Gaithan took off Chris's head to the point where Chris got a concussion. Chris was pretty ticked off after the play, like, come on, dude, like, run the same team. That set him back a little bit. He had the ankle a little bit in practice in early in fall camp. See him develop as a solid number 2 target. That was nice. Definitely want to see some more development from the line across the board. But there are plenty of bright spots overall for FIU, again, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
Let's show Dayton Montiel also love as well. A local product transferred from Marshall, comes to Cardinal Gibbons, from Cardinal Gibbons, comes to FIU, has the unenviable task of replacing Tommy Heatherly, who, of course, we know had a booming leg. And Dayton did a nice job as well. So those were all positives.
Gotcha. So I want to kind of transition to Mike McIntyre, the offseason now. So
Sure.
Mike McIntyre received a contract extension. I believe now it goes to 2027, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on the extension?
It surprised me.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
I don't have an issue with it. I'll say this. No one, I think I kind of heard you say, Kevin, no one was picking FIU to win more than 2 games this year outside of yours truly. I'll take a victory lap here. I said 4.
Kudos. Good job, Eric.
So in that sense, and I said it, if Mike McIntyre got this team to 6 wins, I thought he deserved to be coach of the year in college football, just quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to look at it from that perspective, and Scott Carr as a good faith offer is saying, hey, everything you've done from, I don't think Scott or Mike or anyone would mind me, because I think McIntyre's actually come out and said it now, so I think I can say it publicly. Mike McIntyre turned down money in his contract to defer to assistants. He's making only $750,000. I say that in air quotes only, but he could have been paid more. So let's start for starters there. Taking less to assemble the staff he has, which is getting veteran coordinators all the way across the board, and then assistants who have local ties. If you want to give him that. Going out of his way to ingratiate himself with the fans, something that, again, no disrespect to Butch Davis, Butch was a football coach first, second, and third. Mike McIntyre is all of those things, but I think he is very cognizant of the fact that he needs to be the chief of FIU football. No disrespect to Katie Basin, who I think has the chief of staff role title, but he needs to be out there and be maybe the chief marketer, right? Be the face of FIU football. He's cognizant of that, right? So if you want to say as a good faith offer for doing all of those things in conjunction with the 4 wins and now this recruiting class, which of course the extension happened prior, but you kind of see the recruiting class shaping up. You give him the extra year. Okay. That I can understand. But it seemed a little soon considering his contract wasn't until 2026 anyhow. I could have seen waiting till next year and seeing if you get that gradual trajectory that Mike McIntyre has shown in his stops at Colorado, at San Jose State. 1 year, first year is that building, is that kind of growth year. That second year is where you take the big leap. So I would have been fine waiting to see if that happens, but all in all, I don't have like a huge objection with it either.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. Again, bias is dangerous, but I like Coach Mike. He's cool, Every time he just walks into that door for the press conferences, it's like, oh damn, Mike's here finally. Thank God, this is awesome. Can't wait to hear what he says. So 2027 is quite far away. That's 5 years. That's 5 years of football for Mike McIntyre in South Florida. So I wanted to ask this. I'm very happy with the extension. But how big was it for FIU, for Scott Carr, and for the athletics program to get this extension done now? Not even with college football season being over, to say that he is the man. He is the man with the plan, the lights out man for the next 5 years.
Again, I mean, not to kind of rehash what I said, but that's where I think if you want to do it as a good faith offer, that's fine. How crucial, to your question, Jake, how crucial was it to do it now? I don't think it was.
Yeah.
He would have had 4 seasons left on his deal. If the extension came with a raise in pay, I'd get it. You say, here's, because of the fact you turned down money, we want to give you some incentives. I haven't FOIA'd the new contract yet, but from everything I was told, it's the same, just a 1-year extension. So how crucial was it? I don't think it was necessary. I mean, I don't think this is a shot at Mike McIntyre. I don't think Mike McIntyre was on line for another head coaching gig in the near future when he was defensive coordinator in Memphis. That's not to say that I don't think he deserved another shot, but his tenure at Colorado didn't necessarily end the way you would have wanted to in terms of on-the-field success. Didn't end the way you would have wanted to. So unless there's something that I don't know, Mike McIntyre's agent is not Jimmy Sexton. If you know anything about Jimmy Sexton clients, you know that they're not long for where they're at. So Mike McIntyre does not have Jimmy Sexton as his agent. I want to say he's CAA. creative arts agency. So he would have been there. But again, if you want to do it as a good faith offer, I get it. And I think in that sense, he probably is more than deserving of it, given the circumstances of him taking the job and what he did to invest in the program.
Yep. Alex Shaw left a comment. He's watching on our Facebook. He left this comment and he said, okay, well, first he said that. He said, scholarship talk, how many do we have left? Are we going to use them on high school players or the transfer portal? God knows we need more beef. I mean, I love a good steak as much as anybody else, but I feel like that is definitely a question to just directly ask Mike. Hint, hint, Mike. If you're watching, hint, hint, Mike. Spot's open for you on the show. But Mike has made a point since his first press conference that he wants to find talent not just in the local level in high school, but through the transfer portal and through the entire country. He's made it a definite point that he wants to find talent anywhere through any means necessary. And he also said this, Mac called me personally to renew our season tickets. What other head coach does that go, Mac? I agree. The biggest eye-opening thing the first eye-opening decision that Mike made that really made me go, wow, we got a coach, was when he and the rest of the football team held that, I don't even know what you call it, like a press event a few weeks before before the season, when he introduced the entire coaching staff as well as the AD. He was there. He answered questions from AJ Ricketts. It was broadcasted live. Eric, I believe you were there. I was, and so was I. And that was just such a cool event that I've never remembered seeing before. And it's crazy to see that event happen. It's just get hype everywhere. It was a great moment. So there we go with Mike McIntyre. Now it is time to take a quick break, a news break, where I will go over some of the biggest stories regarding FIU, not just in the sports, but also just university level. I got three for you today. Two sports ones. First things first. Let me make sure I get the right notes here. FIU men's soccer player Stephen Afrifa, midfielder, has been drafted in the first round by Sporting Kansas City in the MLS draft. The Sporting Kansas City took Afrifa with the number 8 pick overall. With the MLS preseason right around the corner in early January, we are wishing Stephen good luck. He made a lot of memories with FIU men's soccer the past few years, and we wish him all the best. In addition, the Arizona Cardinals have signed former FIU quarterback James Morgan, Money James, to their practice squad. As you may or may not know, Morgan was drafted in the 4th round by the New York Jets in the 2020 NFL draft, and he's kind of shifted teams this past season with the New York Jets, along with Pittsburgh, Carolina, and Indianapolis, all of which on the practice squad. But as Kyler Murray is injured for the foreseeable future, it makes sense for the Cardinals to pick up quarterbacks where they can. And last but not least, FIU has received a $500,000 grant from the Blackstone Charitable Foundation, establishing a Blackstone Launchpad at FIU. This is a program that's designed to provide students with skills, knowledge, and guidance to transform ideas into companies. The quote, Blackstone Launchpad will boost venture coaching for FIU student entrepreneurs, leverage existing FIU entrepreneurial and career programs for students, and create a new FIU students pitch competition linked to Launchpad's national pitch competition, and quote. So if you're a young student with an idea to run a company, you now have a bit more options to go with at this wonderful college. Let's move on to the big thing, the signing class.
Alrighty, signing class. So 20 guys, as we've mentioned. I'm going to play the first clip from McIntyre, just kind of to describe a little bit of the class that we have here to discuss tonight.
We signed 20 young men today, 15 high schoolers. And of the 20 people we signed, 15 of them from the state of Florida. 8 of them are from Dade and Broward counties. We said we were going to do that when we got here. 4 transfers. We have 1 transfer portal, then 1 JUCO transfer. And then, of course, we signed the best name in college football history in Rowdy Beers. So we are excited about this group, and we're excited about what they bring.
So there is Mike McIntyre's, I guess, initial statement from his press conference, besides the lights out moment that we saw a little earlier in the show. But very quickly, 20 players, going to read them out quickly. Sorry if I botch any of the names. Christian Peterson, tight end. JT Anderson, defensive back. Preston Thompson, defensive back. Jack Daly, defensive lineman. Antoine Cobb, defensive lineman. Landon Hale, defensive back. Kyle McNeil, wide receiver. Louis Maurice Jr., wide receiver. Victor Evans, defensive back. Marquez Tatum, defensive lineman. Braden Staten, tight end. Daniel Michael or Michelle, offensive lineman. Travis Burke, offensive lineman. Todrick Bruton, so that is an edge rusher. Mr. Clark, defensive back. Jaheim Buchanan, offensive lineman.
I love it.
Keon Jenkins, as we talked about, quarterback. Jamar Holman, defensive back. And Michael Rabus. And that is the final player there. Eric, just what are your thoughts on the signing class so far? 20 names, as we mentioned, 15 from the state of Florida, 5 out of state. A couple transfers in there. That includes JT Anderson, who was a Bryant State transfer. And I believe Jack Daly was the other Bryant State transfer. So what are your thoughts on the class so far?
Yeah, I cannot lie. This is a class that impressed me. I was not expecting, given the 4-8 year that they were coming off of, to have this much success, particularly in South Florida. I'll quickly hit on Alex Shaw's question, because I think it's one that a lot of fans will have in terms of how many scholarships are available. This one isn't a coach speak answer. It truly is fluctuating, mainly because with NIL and the transfer portal and whatnot, if a player leaves tomorrow, there's a scholarship available, right? So from what I've gathered, it's between 8 and 12, but that is not a verified answer. That's just me kind of doing the math of this guy's chosen to retire, this guy's chosen to leave where I think they were at the end of the year. I don't have that verified, but it truly is. It's going to fluctuate. So there's that. And this would be a perfect segue into one of those other questions in terms of your question is what I think of the class. I was very surprised and very impressed at how they did up front in the offensive line. I thought given the amount of offensive line talent they had returning, they wouldn't be as O-line heavy, but I guess it helps when you get Jaheim Buchanan, who's 6'3", 285 already walking in the door. You get a Daniel Michelle. I thought it's Michael. It's Michelle, 6'6", 270 coming in. So Daniel Michelle. And then the late one, Burke. Forgetting Burke's first name, I think it's Travis. Travis Burke from Gardner Webb. So at least you get someone who's already played college football at the FCS level. Guys, what I love the most about Burke is you saw the little video they did of all the players when they signed and whatnot. Burke's head is touching the top of the ceiling because he's 6'9". All the other players when they come in, there's all this room between the ceiling. Burke with his hair is touching the top of whatever room they're shooting that video in. So he's 6'9", a 300-pounder. So you're getting size there. So where's the beef? That's where it is. Players that I'm definitely keeping an eye on, the receivers. If there's one critique I'd have of the receiver room this year, not a lot of tall guys. When Randall St. Felix left the room at 6'3", that was the majority of the size. Caleb Lynham is still there, but Caleb isn't getting a ton of playing time. Tyrese Chambers, God bless him, but I've stood next to Tyrese. Tyrese says he's 6'1". Okay. Tyrese is 5'11" and change. In cleats, it's probably closer to 6-footed-ish, but Tyrese is not 6'1". Chris Mitchell is closer to 6-footish. So to get guys like Louis Maurice, who's a legit 6'2" coming in, McNeil, who's coming in, who's 6'2", to get the kid from Memphis, Kevin. I know he wasn't on the name you just read out, but there's a kid from Memphis who was listed as 247. They just confirmed it. Eric Rivers is the player.
I saw that.
3-star recruit from Memphis. 6'1" and change. So you're getting some taller receivers coming in. I think that helps, especially with Rivaldo Fairweather walking out the door. Now the tight ends that came in, and I was a little impressed that they were able to get as many quality players. Rowdy Beers was just labeled a 3-star recruit by 247 Sports. So if you see him listed as no stars in my story, that's an update from 247 that just came in. But him at 6 and change. Christian Pedersen, who played at Louisville, 6'4", 6'5" and change. So you're getting a ton of talent. The kid Braden Staten from Nashville, the Nashville suburbs, 6'6". So very impressive the size you're getting there. That was very impressive. Of course, Keon Jenkins, when we talked about him, that's the top of the class, But you're also getting some good DBs. Preston Thompson was a FAU commit for a while. Jamari Holloman was a Colorado recruit for a while, which I will quickly plug The Athletic. If anyone's interested, The Athletic did a story on the recruits that Deion didn't want, the players who were signed to Colorado prior to Deion's arrival. Jamari's quoted in that story. Go ahead and take a look at that if you want. It's a kind of a tough break when there's a coaching change and your offer automatically goes away. But that is FIU's game. He's ready to go. Mr. Clark, someone who Larry Bluestein is raved about, said he's a body who's ready to go immediately. Those guys in defensive backfield. So really overall, I think there's reason to be impressed by this class again, specifically to get 20. I had no doubt that they'd be able to sign 25, 30 players now that you can go over 25 with the new rules. But I didn't think they'd be able to get 20 in the early session coming off of a 4-8 record. So now you've got the meteor class and you can let spring play out, see how those position battles are going to shake out, who may leave from other teams, and then go transfer portal heavy there. So
yep.
I think there's reason to be impressed.
Yep. I wanted to ask you, how does this class compare to the one from maybe last season?
I am a firm believer, guys, and I'm doing this without having looked at last season's class off the top of my head. I can kind of go from memory, but I'm a firm believer that ideally, and this was a Butch Davis staple, ideally you're out recruiting yourself each class. That's no disrespect to the players who signed last year, but ideally in any program, as you get better, especially in a rebuild, you're out recruiting the players from before. So the advantage that the players from last year's class will have is that they're a year in, right? A lot of the players from last year, we saw them play and or start. Mm-hmm. Donovan Manuel's part of that class. Jacob Peace, a lot of the guys who came from lower levels are all part of that class. Sam Hill, part of that class. There were some disappointments, and I mean by that, D.A.V. Hammond, of course, was the highest rated offensive line recruit to sign in the history of FIU football. He's back in Lakeland. He chose not to pursue football. He's done. You look at come on, I'm forgetting Henry Gray wasn't part of that class, but he left. But you had some players who from that class who aren't necessarily contributing, right? So that's something to keep an eye on. But you get guys like Wyatt Lawson's 2020. Sorry, now I'm trying to think off the top of my head of this class. But nevertheless, you get the point, right? Like you're getting enough of the players that Mike McIntyre brought in from last year's class were contributing. So how does it compare? I would say this. In terms of talent, on the surface talent, this class is better. Mm-hmm. But at least you have a positive in that the players from last year's class stepped in and are playing significant minutes.
Yeah.
Yep. So
you talk about the talent, and my first thought when I think of FIU football right now currently is youth, is how young this team is. And when you bring these fresh new faces into this signing class, how many of these, what percentage of these players do you think that you can see starting right away for this FIU football team?
I think there are spots to be had immediately on the offensive line, particularly with Julius Pierce leaving. John Bach, where's he going to fit? Is it going to be guard or center? Wyatt Lawson got a lot of those starts playing towards the end. Where's he going to fit guard or center? I think there's spots on the offensive line to be had. I think Jack Daly is going to come in immediately. That's probably one of my favorite signings from this class. No disrespect to Devon Strickland. We all love Devon. Devon is a 4-3 defensive tackle in my mind. I never really felt like Devon Strickland as a zero technique defensive tackle. For listeners who may not know, I mean, you guys know this. Your techniques on defensive line, you're playing different gaps. When you're a zero technique defensive tackle, you're essentially responsible for two gaps right over the center, like that nose guard. That's not Devon's strength. I always felt Devon was a different type of 4-3 defensive tackle. Jack Daly's 6'4", 320. He is a space eater. He's a sizable player. He's going to step in. I'd be surprised if Jack Daly doesn't start immediately at defensive tackle. I think there's room at corner with Andrew Volmar departing, with Henry Gray departing. There's definitely room at corner. Hezekiah Massey, that's one from last year's class who stepped up and got a starting role. He's going to have to definitely earn that role again next year. Linebackers one, I don't necessarily think it's going to be filled from this class. I think they may have to go to the portal. So maybe that'll be someone we see, in the February signing day. So what percentage? I would say just spitballing right now, and let's say of the 20 we have, because we don't know what's going to come in the fall or in February.
Yeah.
I'd say there are about 4 or 5 guys in this class who truly, just based on last year's performance, there's room for them to step in immediately and compete for a starting job. And as I said, Jack Daly, in my mind, should more or less walk in day one as a starter at defensive tackle. I think JT Anderson should walk in and probably get a role at nickel. Those are 2 guys off the top.
You mentioned that this class was one that impressed you. So staying with that there in mind, which players specifically maybe impressed or maybe surprised you that came over to FIU, besides obviously Keon Jenkins, who may have surprised everyone that he flipped his commitment to Auburn to FIU?
No real surprises outside of that. I mean, that was the biggest surprise for me. Player, again, I would say impressed. Just talk about him, Jack Daly. I mean, when you record the 160-something tackles that he's recorded as a defensive lineman, I mean, that's big. And he had something like 30-something, I think it was 33 or 34 tackles for loss during his career at Bryant. When Alex Shaw says, "Where's the beef?" that applies to the defensive line as well. Getting defensive linemen who can play the 3-4 scheme is huge. So that might, guys, just to emphasize again, that's going to open up things for Sean Peterson Jr. When you have those defensive linemen on the inside who are doing their job correctly in the 3-4, that's going to open up room for Sean P to make plays on the edge. So there's one. Luby Maurice is one I don't think we've talked about a ton. If you got a chance to see him up at Palm Beach, which I had a chance to a little bit, he's every bit of 6'2", 190. Definitely has a college football frame walking through the door. Had a deep playoff run, so he was making plays against players who, are Division I football players. He's someone who I think can walk in and definitely compete for a role, significant playing time in the receiver room. Christian Pedersen, that's another one. To get someone who, went cross country from California to Louisville, former 3-star recruit, it wouldn't shock me to see Christian step in immediately, because where that tight end room is right now, I am a huge fan of Jackson McDonald. Jackson is a hell of an athlete from down there in Marathon, in the Keys. Played high school quarterback, played, defense, a ton of different things. It's a long snapper and all these things. But to see Jackson get as much playing time as he did, that was interesting, considering the fact that, you have Rivaldo and Josiah. They're a tight end.
Josiah Meeman. Yeah.
Josiah Meeman at tight end. So I'll be interested to see, does Jackson have a role? Maybe. But if you can get a Christian Pedersen and another one of those other tight ends, whether it's Rowdy Beers or Braden Staten come in, I think that's going to be big. So those would be the names I would say probably, are most intriguing. But Luby Maurice, especially as a receiver, now with Tyrese gone, that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Something else that I've been noticing about this signing class. Let me make sure I get my numbers. 1, 2, 3, 3 tight ends.
Yes.
3 offensive linemen. And this is the most shocking part. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 defensive backs. So with that said, they stacked up the offensive line and they stacked up the secondary. Between offense and defense, what side of the field do you think has benefited most from this signing class for the FIU Panthers?
It's a great question, Jake. You're a professional.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Benefited the most. Listen, the defense has pieces, young pieces, but they still need more talent. So you need more people pushing. Especially when you lose Volmar, you lose Henry Gray, you lose Dorian Hall. I think that defensive backfield, I'll be very intrigued to see how some of those position battles shake out. You got to assume that D Hill's got to roll, right? That's one.
Yeah.
CJ Christian was someone who was really starting to come on a little bit before his injury. You can't guarantee him a role, but you think he's going to play a factor. Outside of that, the rest of them, you got to think are up for grabs.
Yeah.
So to bring in these defensive backs, I think that's huge. So I would say probably benefit the most in terms of immediate, I'd say the defense with the defensive backs.
Yeah.
Like I said, JT Anderson, I think, is going to step in and play nickel, if not, an outside corner immediately. So
one last question from me, Eric. Is Rowdy Beers the greatest football name you've ever heard?
Guys, I had to double check, and shame on me. I missed that Rowdy Beers had, some interaction with Josh Ergel prior to earlier this week. When I first saw the name, Rowdy Beers, I'm going to assume this is a PG podcast. But for anyone who
You know where you're going with this. Yeah.
for anyone who follows some of the satirical Twitter accounts,
Mm-hmm.
I had to double check and make sure this wasn't Ball Sack Sports. I'm just being honest. I was like, what?
We all had to, man.
So I triple checked it, and Rowdy Beers was a real person. Once I validated that, easily probably, I saw there was another kid who had a great name. I can't remember his name right now. Who just committed to another school, but I think Rowdy Beers is, and I think he has a sister that's Reagan, and I can't remember what his brother's name is, but they're all our names. But he was the one who got Rowdy. Just amazed. So I knew once I tweeted that out that it might go viral, and sure enough, it went viral. So.
Yeah, it was trending on Twitter, and that's insane. I want to say the last time FIU football was trending on Twitter this much was unfortunately when Casey Horney was hired, and everyone was had a field day with that. I will say I
almost
don't
forgot
know
about that, Jake.
Yeah, I don't know if this was the player you're thinking of, but Central Arkansas got a commit by the name of Dude Person.
Yes.
Dude Person.
What a name.
Safety Dude, first name Dude, last name Person. It seems like one of those, like when you fill out an application, that's like the default option given, like as a default, and they change it to whatever. But yeah, Dude Person, Rowdy Beers. I love these names. And like every year there's like a standout name that's brought out.
And here we have a question from the chat once again.
From Alex, I see. Is the conference schedule finalized? It's not finalized just yet. It should be. What is it? It is December. I'd expect it to be out shortly after bowl season, but it's not finalized yet. Any info on the 2023 schedule outside of of course you got Arkansas. That's going to be the big P5 opponent. Nothing major right now. Of course, Florida Atlantic is not on the schedule. FAU is back on schedule at 24. Hopefully this will, kind of give Alex a little something. I had a conversation with Scott Carr on the record following the presser. What's today? Thursday. So yesterday, and he talked about his scheduling philosophy, and he said, "Look, we're looking to do one FCS opponent and have one bye game each year. So essentially, for Panther fans in the future." You may have been a little annoyed by the fact that you didn't see as many P5 opponents. You're going to see P5 opponents in 24, 25, 26, and 27 because that is Scott Carr's philosophy. You got to remember there's a little bit of flexibility that's lost because with FAU now being an out-of-conference opponent, now that's automatically an out-of-conference game, right? One that you would have been able to schedule for another team when they're in CUSA. But to Alex's question, no. The big game for 2023 is Arkansas, but the conference schedule will be finalized closer to January.
Mm-hmm. To my knowledge, I think there are only 3 games that are like confirmed. It's the opener against Maine, the University of Maine, the Black Bears, on August 31st. That's here in Miami. On September 16th, they travel to East Hartford to play the UConn Huskies. That's the rematch from the home and home that began last year. And as you mentioned, Eric, the Arkansas game that's scheduled for November 18th in lovely Fayetteville, Arkansas. We're just under an hour here, Eric. It's been a blast talking to you, man. We really appreciate it. Just talking all things FIU football. It never goes out of style talking about football. It never does, no matter what time of the year it is. Since we got a bit of extra time, you down to predict some NFL games with us, Eric?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Kevin, take over.
So obviously we have to predict the best game of the week: Dolphins versus Packers. Christmas Day game that is nationally televised. Jake, you will be there.
Yes, I will.
Packers are 6-8, having a down year, a very big down year, and the Dolphins are 8-6, fighting for a playoff spot. Eric, Dolphins or Packers?
I'm going with the Dolphins as a Tampa native and a noted Dolphin hater for a long time. Now, you know what? All jokes aside, I love what Mike McDaniel's doing down there. I'm a Tua guy. I think Tua is the real deal. Love it. They have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So give me the Fins.
And Tua did get snubbed from the Pro Bowl, in my opinion, by the way. But it's okay. I'm going to go Dolphins. Easy. Aaron Rodgers maybe scares you a little bit. But besides that, Miami's just a better team right now. And you're playing under the national lights once again. Christmas game. So that should be a fun one. And you're fighting for a playoff spot. And, you lost huge games against Buffalo. Los Angeles, and then the one before that. Ooh,
San Francisco.
San Fran. That was 3 huge losses there. The last time Miami lost 3 in a row, I believe they went on to win 5 in a row. So
yeah.
Maybe that'll be the start of another win streak there.
I gotta go Dolphins as well. I keep forgetting that the majority of games are going to be on Saturday this week. That's really cool. I don't know, Saturday football is dope. Give me Miami. I think the Dolphins have a way more to play for than the Packers at this very moment. They have a lot to prove after 3 super tough losses, but I don't know. The Dolphins played really good against Buffalo, albeit obviously the weather playing a part in that, whatever they want to say, but I got the Dolphins. I think they're going to win this one and carry some momentum to a massive game against New England the week after.
Yep. Alrighty. Falcons and Ravens. Eric, what do you got?
The Falcons are kind of in disarray. I'm not gonna lie. I haven't stopped laughing at the fact that Marcus Mariota just said, "I lost the job. All right, I'm going home." Like it's kind of hilarious to me, to be honest with you. Give me Baltimore, even though they're Lamar Jackson's injury situation. I think Baltimore has more to play for.
Mm-hmm. Jake,
it is worth noting though that it's looking more and more that Lamar's not going to be playing. Right? It looks like Tyler Huntley is going to be the man. I do like Huntley. I think he's probably one of the better backup quarterbacks in the NFL so far. And the Atlanta Falcons have been just the epitome of inconsistent this season, and yet somehow they still have a very, 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 very slight chance to somehow win the goddamn division, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
That said, again, Baltimore is in a similar boat as Miami. Their games are meaning a lot more as they want to somehow get into the wild card. I'll take Baltimore in a very close one. The Falcons make it interesting, but Baltimore wins in the end.
Yeah, I'm going Ravens here. I think it's a pretty easy pick there.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, Lions and Panthers. The Lions 7-7. Coach Campbell out there just getting these guys out there. They're fighting for a playoff spot. They may make it. So Dan Campbell out there, getting these guys riding them all along to what hopefully is another playoff spot. And then the Panthers kind of in the same boat as the Falcons when it comes to maybe possibly winning that division. So, Eric, who do you have here between Lions and Panthers?
I've got Detroit. I mean, again, playing for a lot. I'm old enough to remember when the Lions used to make the playoffs consistently. So I'm probably showing my age there. No, I give me Detroit. I just think they have more to play for. Also a better team, as you mentioned, under Dan Campbell doing some things. So give me Detroit.
I believe it's still Sam Darnold starting for Carolina, and I hate to say it, I'm just not a fan of Sam, and I'm a massive fan of Dan Campbell and what we have seen so far from Jared Goff, who I think has actually had a really great year. And arguably, maybe it's a hot take, but in the NFC Pro Bowl quarterbacks Kirk Cousins was in, I would have put Goff over Cousins. I'm not even joking. I would have done it. But I'll take Detroit. Yeah. Detroit, again, has a really nice shot at getting to the playoffs. And with so few games left, every game matters. And give me the Lions.
I'm taking the Lions here. I mean, this team is so fun to watch. And outside of being a Dolphins fan, you have to see what Detroit's doing. It's impressive. Now they just got their first round back, Jamison Williams, who will be a big piece for them. There we go. So that should be interesting. I'm taking the Lions there.
A bunch of clean sweeps so far. No one has stranded away from everybody else yet with these picks.
I don't like any underdog picks right now. So
okay.
We're gonna keep it like this. Bills and Bears. I think we'll all take Bills here, but maybe this is an underdog pick for someone. Eric, you're up.
Give me Buffalo.
All right, Jake.
Buffalo.
All right, Buffalo. That one's a quick one. Saints versus Browns. That should be a fun matchup there. Deshaun Watson playing his third game. He is 2-0 as a Cleveland Brown. Eric, who you got?
Cleveland.
Yeah.
Jake.
There was some worry about Nick Chubb not playing in this one. However, from what I last saw, he is going to play. Give me Cleveland. I still don't know how I really feel about New Orleans. I still think if the Saints want to be successful, they're going to need a quarterback of the future. And because I don't really trust any of the quarterbacks they have on the team. And say what you will about Deshaun, but I think I would definitely take Deshaun over Andy Dalton this point.
Oh, yeah.
At this point in both their careers. So give me the Browns.
Yeah. All right. I'm taking the Browns as well. Seahawks and Chiefs. This is going to be a fun little game here. So this may be my underdog pick. Who knows? But Eric, you're up.
Give me Kansas City.
Jake.
Oh, man.
Is this your underdog pick?
With very few games remaining, there is still a chance for Kansas City to take the number 1 spot away from Buffalo and get that elusive first round bye. And the Seahawks are no joke. They've had a tough stretch of games as of late, with a couple of losses against Carolina and San Francisco. But they are a good team. But they're running into a wall in Kansas City, a determined Kansas City that has a lot to play for in December. So I got to go Chiefs.
I'm taking the Chiefs here as well. Giants and Vikings.
Okay.
Giants and Vikings. Huge game for the Giants here as they try to make the playoffs. Vikings already secured their spot, but would like to take over that division as much as they can. So, Eric, you're up.
This might be the underdog pick. I'll take New York.
All right. Jake, you're up.
I love it. Good pick. Nice pick. I'm taking the New York Giants as well. The NFC East is still a very interesting division with obviously Dallas and also Washington and of course Philadelphia. Giants are a good team. Don't kid yourselves. I'm going to take New York in the upset.
I am also going to take New York with my upset pick. Although this is not my big time upset pick. And keep in mind, you mentioned this before, Jake. 1 p.m. Kirk Cousins is a different beast. So
he's a menace.
We'll see what happens there with him. Yeah, he's a menace. Bengals versus Patriots. I am taking the Patriots. Eric, who are you taking?
Cincinnati.
That was your big time upset, right, Kevin? New Orleans.
I said
New England.
I said Patriots.
Yeah,
I meant
Patriots.
Bengals. I meant Bengals.
Okay.
How am I going to take the Patriots when the Dolphins need to make a playoffs, man? That was my bad.
I couldn't imagine having to be a member of New England or even a fan having a reel from what the hell happened against Las Vegas last Sunday. That was awesome. As a Dolphins fan, that was so awesome to see. Cincinnati. Yeah.
All right. Texans and Titans. This is my big upset pick. The Texans will win this game. I'll give them hope. They almost beat the Cowboys. They've been playing pretty solid as of late, although they've been losing. But I'm going to take them here against the Titans. I just don't know why I feel like this is the team they'll beat. Eric, you're up.
You know what? I'll agree with you. I'll take Houston.
Great.
We're going to be sweep, Jake.
Listen, Houston. I absolutely. There are some teams that you can think, oh, they're way better than what their record tells you they are. I don't think Houston's one of those teams. They are in a terrible spot with I hate to say it, with a bunch of nobodies at quarterback. But Tennessee also proved to me that the AFC South might be won by Jacksonville in the end. It really could be. And I know they're playing New York, the Jets right now. Last I checked, the game was tied. I'll take another look and see how that's going. But in the meantime, I think that Jacksonville can absolutely take the AFC South from Tennessee, but it's not happening in this game. I'm going to go not so fast to both of you and go with the chalk. I'll take Tennessee, though I'm not happy about it.
And a quick update, Jaguars are up 10-3 on the Jets, Thursday Night Football. So, all right, Commanders and 49ers. Commanders really need this one. Will they do it against 49ers? I don't think so. I'm taking the 49ers here. Brock Purdy, the story continues. Mm-hmm. Eric, who's your pick?
Give me San Francisco. I do not think the Commanders get the win.
Yep. Jake?
Yeah. I have to agree. Brock Purdy is in such a great spot. You realize you could put like 20 other quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Throw them in San Francisco, and they're Super Bowl contenders. That said, I do like what I see from Brock Purdy. I think he could be a great quarterback for years to come. Give me the Niners.
Eagles and Cowboys. Keep in mind, Gardner Minshew will be your starting quarterback this week, which is why the Eagles will fall to 13-2. I'm taking the Dallas Cowboys. Eric, you're up.
I'm taking Dallas for that reason.
Yeah. Gardner Minshew, the former Jaguars legend, the man with the mustache, he ain't gonna beat Dallas. Give me the Cowboys.
All right, Raiders and Steelers. This is the 8:15 primetime game for Saturday Night Football. I'm going to take I'm taking the Las Vegas Raiders. I just feel like I feel like that seems a little bit better than the Steelers out here. Yeah, Eric, you're up.
Give me Mike T. I'm rolling with Mike Tomlin, the Steelers.
Yeah, I have to take the Steelers as well. There's a lot of meaning for this game, and unexpectedly too. It's the 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception, and they're going to retire Franco Harris's number, and he just recently passed away. I believe it was yesterday. So the emotions are going to be high at, I'm still calling it Heinz Field, and I think the Steelers are going to play the best game that the Steelers have played this season. Give me Pittsburgh.
Yep. Alrighty. Broncos and Rams. The battle of the 4-10 teams. Is Russell Wilson still there? I mean, he's in, right? I thought he was concussed.
No, I don't think Russ is in.
Oh, he's out. Yeah, he's out. It's Brett Ripken or something. And then for the Rams, it is Baker Mayfield, which is why I will take the Rams. They'll go to 5-10. Eric, you're up.
Yeah, give me St. Louis. Let's try this again. Give me Los Angeles.
We wish they're in St. Louis.
I've done that so many times with the Chargers these last few years. I get it. Who would have thought that entering this time before the season that this matchup between Denver and Los Angeles would become the battle of mid? But it unfortunately is. Both teams are extremely disappointing. The Rams were just destroyed by injuries, and the Broncos were destroyed by incompetence. I'll take Los Angeles, though, because I am a big fan of Baker. He's at home. I think he'll get the job done.
Alrighty. I believe this is your team, Eric. Bucks and Cardinals. I am taking the Buccaneers here. Tom Brady will beat the Cardinals. And maybe we see James Morgan, former FIU Panther, take some snaps out there if Trace McSorley goes down or just not perform to standards.
I prefer not to have to root against J-Mo. I'm scared to take the Bucks, seeing as how the season has been what it's been. But I'm going with the hometown team. Give me Tampa.
Jake?
Yeah, it is worth noting the game is in Arizona. It is in Arizona, but
this
still
is Sunday Night Football.
Yeah. It's the primetime Christmas game, but it's a trap game for Tampa. It's definitely, this screams trap game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because it would be easy to say that Arizona is in a state of delusion and that Tampa can roll all over them, and I think they will. There was no catch or punchline there. I think Tampa Bay will roll here. Give me the Buccaneers.
And then the final game before we wrap this up, Chargers and Colts. I'm going to take the Colts. Just why not? I think it'll be fun. Nick Foles is at the helm for this Monday Night Football game, and I'll take the Colts as an underdog pick. I think this is 3 underdog picks for me this week. So, Eric, you're up.
As much as I want to take the fight in Jeff Saturdays, give me LA.
Mm-hmm. I am going to go with Kevin here. I'm taking Indianapolis for no other reason except for the fact that it'd be really funny if they won and beat the Chargers after all the hype that Herbert and the Chargers have gotten as of recently. They've been on a hot streak. They obviously beat Miami a few weeks ago. But again, it's another trap game. And on these Monday night games, these primetime games, you never know what the hell's going to happen. And give me Indianapolis. All right, Eric, before we go, this has been like I've been interested about this ever since this show began. Behind you is your wall of passes, right? Your wall of media credentials, correct?
Slide this. Which am I sliding? Or I can we'll just do this. This can.
Oh, muted himself.
You're muted, Eric. You're muted.
Eric, you are muted.
Yeah, I unplugged my my podcast mic to go with the computer mic. You can't hear me, right?
Yeah, we hear you.
All right, yeah, I'll walk you guys over here. So, yes, this is the wall. Everything up through last year, I have not made a room for this year. So this is everything from 20. If I can do the camera right, 2017 through 2021. So yes,
those FIU credentials.
That could be you one day, Kevin. That could be you.
Maybe.
That is absolutely so cool. You've inspired me to want to do something like that as well. with all the passes I've racked up with FIU and now with Lemon City. Eric, you've been such a great guest. We can't thank you enough for joining us today, talking a bit about FIU football. And to the people watching on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, if you want to follow Eric Henry's work, please be sure to do so. Follow him on Twitter. I believe it is, let me sure I get this right. It's Eric C. Henry _ on Twitter. And of course, be sure to also follow Underdog Dynasty as well. And yeah, any final thoughts, Eric, on the state of FIU football or just FIU and Conference USA in general?
No, just say thank you guys for having me on. Appreciate you having me on. We'll do it again soon.
For sure.
All righty then. Well, I speak for myself, Kevin and Eric, when we say have a very Merry Christmas or a very happy holidays. Until the next time, paws up.
Paws up.